Cutting through the heart of the Promised Land in Israel is a road often referred to as the Path of the Patriarchs. This 146-mile stretch of highway is known officially as Route 60. It is of deep historical and biblical significance to both Christians and Jews. My next guest is one of the stars of this new documentary about the fabled road. It's called Route 60, the Biblical Highway. Here to tell us about it and much more is the former U.S. Secretary of State, now distinguished fellow at the Hudson Institute, Mike Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for joining us.
Raymond, thanks for having me on. It's good to be with you again.
Wonderful to see you. Before we talk about this incredible new movie, Route 60, I want to get your take on a few stories currently making headlines. It's been a little over a year since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Just last week, your successor, Anthony Blinken, announced yet another aid package to Ukraine. Watch.
The United States is committed to empowering Ukraine to write its own future. In the crucible of President Putin's brutal and ongoing war, we're announcing new assistance totaling more than $1 billion in this common effort. That includes $665.5 million in new military and civilian security assistance. In total, we committed over $43 billion in security assistance since the beginning of the Russian aggression.
Secretary Pompeo, another billion in aid going to Ukraine so soon after the disastrous fires in Maui. A new CNN poll shows a majority of Americans, 55%, do not support additional aid going to Ukraine. Your thoughts on Blinken's announcement, and actually it's $100 billion plus so far, and what about these poll numbers?
Well, I think the poll numbers reflect the failures of the Biden administration, not what is, in my judgment, an incredibly important American mission. They've just messed this up, Raymond. Our model in the Trump administration was, of course, to deter precisely what has happened here. Vladimir Putin didn't change. The only thing that changed was American leadership, right? We changed presidents and secretaries of state, and Vladimir Putin invaded Europe. And your point about another $665 million or $1 billion, whatever number was you said, the point is, whatever we were going to provide, we should have provided immediately. This could be over. We could have stopped innocent civilians in Ukraine from being killed. We could have stopped authoritarian aggression in Europe. We could have prevented what is inevitable if Putin is successful, which is not just Ukraine, but Moldova, perhaps the Baltic nations also being invaded by Vladimir Putin. Now, the Biden administration has just fundamentally failed at the central mission, which is deter that kind of aggression. I wish they had not been so fearful of somehow spinning Vladimir Putin up. My sense is he was already spun up. Provocation comes from weakness, not strength, and instead they've been weak.
And speaking of Russia, North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un arrived in Russia on Tuesday for talks with Putin about a weapons deal, with Russia in need of munitions after 18 months of war. Now, Russia's already acquired weaponized drones from Iran that it's used in Ukraine. State Department spokesman Mather Miller had this to say about the possible arms deal.
We have been very clear about what our position is, which is that any transfer between of arms from North Korea to Russia would violate multiple United Nations Security Council resolutions, and we will monitor what happens and will not hesitate to take action to hold those accountable if necessary.
Secretary Pompeo, what do you make of these developments, and how would or should the U.S. act if that transfer takes place from North Korea to Russia?
First of all, Rim, that statement is laughable. You said earlier that the Iranians have transferred weapons to Russia. That's true. Drones that have killed Ukrainian civilians and kids. What has the administration done? They gave them $6 billion day before yesterday. So rather than hold anyone accountable for violating these restrictions, these sanctions, they've rewarded them. They're trying to cut a deal with the Iranians even as we speak. If you're Chairman Kim in North Korea and you saw that, I don't think for a moment a statement by the State Department spokesman means a darn thing to you. Well, they say, well, we'll hold them accountable. They know our position. It's not about words, Raymond. It's about deeds. This is what we had done so well. Chairman Kim would not have done that under a different set of leaders here in the United States.
Mm-hmm. And Secretary Pompeo, the gray eminence behind all of this really is China. And you see China ramping up tensions with Taiwan. This partnership with Russia only gets stronger by the day. This past July, Chinese and Russian warships conducted joint exercises in the Sea of Japan before engaging in joint patrols near U.S. waters in Alaska. President Biden, on his recent visit to Vietnam, said this of U.S. policy toward China.
Really what this trip was about, it was less about containing China. I don't want to contain China. I just want to make sure we have a relationship with China that is on the up and up, squared away. Everybody knows what it's all about.
Secretary Pompeo, is not containing China a wise policy here, given what we've seen, the aforementioned partnership in Russia, their human rights violation, etc.?
That language that President Biden used there from Hanoi was music to Xi Jinping's ears, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party. Forget containing China. We need to protect America. And President Biden has just simply failed to do that. The Chinese have stolen billions of dollars of intellectual property. They foisted a virus that killed nearly 1 million people here inside the United States. They've run spying operations inside of our country. They're in control of major research programs inside our institutions. They're buying farmland near our military facilities. And President Biden simply says, well, we want to have a relationship that's on the up and up. But he's done nothing to make that happen. And that relationship today is not on the up and up. The Chinese Communist Party has been at war economically with the United States for at least 3 decades. And President Biden has only encouraged Xi Jinping to continue this aggressive behavior, and it impacts people from California and Arizona to Maine and Vermont. It is really a bad set of policies, and the risk of war only escalates when President Biden says things like he said in Hanoi.
Secretary Pompeo, does it amaze you that on the one hand, you have the Biden administration saying we need climate change pacts and we have to bind the world to serve the environment and protect the environment, and on the other hand, we are inducing American companies to do business with China, the world's greatest polluter, to say nothing of the religious and human rights violations in that country?
Raymond, it's unexplainable. We know that over the last handful of years, the United States has actually reduced its per capita carbon output, while the Chinese have just simply continued to do what they do and pollute not only with carbon, but all of the other toxic particles as well. Now, it is silly for President Biden to destroy the American economy while building the Chinese economy, even if one has as its top priority. If you had as your top priority what climate change or carbon reduction, the set of policies the Biden administration has put in place have done exactly the opposite.
Secretary Pompeo, a story we've been reporting for months is the Azerbaijani blockade of Nagorno-Karabakh. Now, despite claims that the border crossing is open, the ethnic Armenians in Artsakh, they say they're still being denied humanitarian aid. There have been warnings of a genocide occurring in the region. Meanwhile, the United States and Armenia conducted joint military exercises in the region to train Armenian troops. Mr. Secretary, is a crisis being averted, or is there still what amounts to a genocide being committed by Azerbaijan against ethnic Armenians, many of them Christians?
Well, I remember this problem, Raymond, from my time as secretary. We tried to negotiate, broker a peace arrangement between the two of them, and we got a ceasefire for a matter of days. I can't recall, maybe it was weeks, but nothing that was material. No, this conflict continues. I don't think the Biden administration is spending a minute on this. And Raymond, this is also, we should note, this is all deeply connected to what you were just talking about. Think of the neighborhood there, Iran, Russia, and China, all around this place of Central Asia. The United States should remain committed to its central ideals in the same way that we called out genocide against the Uyghurs inside of China. I hope this administration will continue to defend peoples of every faith, certainly Christians all around the world.
Secretary Pompeo, you were just here in Washington earlier this week to premiere your new film, Route 60, The Biblical Highway. This movie is an unscripted travelogue produced by TBN. You, along with former ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, traveled this historic highway, which runs from Nazareth to Beersheba. and you discuss points of interest really common to Christians and Jews every step of the way. The film hits theaters for 2 nights, September 18th and 19th, through Fathom events. How did you get involved in this project, and what about this stretch of road drew you in?
Oh, goodness. So you can go find out what theaters it's in at route60.movie. And I say that because that's how I was drawn into this. Ambassador Friedman called me, and he knew that Judea and Samaria was a place, and Israel was a place that was near and dear to my heart. As a Christian, one cannot help but understand Israel and Jerusalem's centrality to who we are. And so he proposed this. We would go to this historical place and walk to Shiloh. We would walk to Jerusalem. We would walk to Bethlehem, Bethel. And we would go see these sites, these historical sites. And I would tell the Bible stories there from the New Testament. He would tell them as an Orthodox Jew from the Old Testament perspective. And we would try to share with the whole world some places that are historically important to Jews and Christians alike. Show them things that, frankly, it's just very hard for people to get a chance to go see themselves. I hope folks will go out and watch the movie. It was deeply personal for me as we changed policy in Judea and Samaria while I was Secretary of State. Yeah. And I think for people of faith, they will find it an encouraging movie as well.
Before we continue, I want to give everybody a taste of what they'll see. This is a bit of Route 60, the biblical highway. Take a look.
It can be said that for everything we wish to learn or want to become, there is a road to follow. From the beginning, the road to believing in only one true God, the maker of heaven and earth, has carved its roots through the ancient land of Israel. It is a road that Abraham, the father of nations, walked as the first believer in monotheism. It was along this road that God made his covenant with Abraham, promising that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky. It is a road walked by Jesus, the central figure of Christianity. This road is deeply symbolic in the story of God shared by Jews and Christians. And it is a literal highway that bisects modern Israel, where it is now known simply as Route 60. Route 60 follows the ancient path from Nazareth to Beersheba. It connects many holy sites and biblical events in what could be called the original Bible Belt. It has mile markers, human and divine, that memorialize the acts of celebration, suffering, and salvation that are woven into Israel's history. I'm David Friedman, and I invite you to join me and my co-host and fellow traveler, Mike Pompeo, as we explore the ancient mysteries of Route 60, the biblical highway.
Mr. Secretary, you are a committed Christian. Ambassador Friedman, as you mentioned earlier, is a devout Jew. How did both those experiences, those worldviews, develop the narrative of this documentary?
So we each came at it from our own faith tradition, and then we came at it from a set of shared experiences in the Trump administration, where we had made the historic decision to move the embassy to Jerusalem. We had acknowledged that not every settlement is illegal. We'd acknowledged that Golan Heights belonged to Israel. So we had a set of experiences that were overlapping. And then, of course, these are both Abrahamic faiths, and we had worked so hard to build out the Abraham Accords to create space for Israel, the rightful Jewish homeland. And so we obviously, our faiths have different theological endings, but they all share this same central story. And for us to each walk this road where Jesus had traveled so many years ago and tell our understanding of how this applied to our faith was really very special. We had a few laughs. We had a lot of fun, and I think everyone, including David and I, Ambassador Friedman and I think we all learned a lot as we walked along this historic route.
No, it's fascinating. Look, I did my own documentary years ago in the Holy Land. I've been there many times. It really is off the beaten path, though, this documentary, of the usual sites in the Holy Land. Tell us a little about the itinerary. This was shot over 4 days, but many of these points of interest are usually off limits to tourists. Tell us about, for instance, the altar of Joshua.
Yeah, so it's absolutely true. There were many places that I had not had the chance to go before, and it was because of the relationships we developed, we were able to go see them there. And they're in hard places where there is conflict today in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria. And so it was just great to go see them. So you talk about the altar of Joshua. We got to go to Hebron. Very difficult for people to get to. And there you stood, an Orthodox Jew and an evangelical Christian, at the tombs of the patriarchs, between Abraham and Sarah, the founding patriarchs of each of our faiths. It was truly remarkable. You stood there and you recognized that this is thousands of years of history, and that the stories that are told in this book, the Bible, the stories that are told in this book are real and historically grounded. Yeah. And for people of faith to be there and to get a chance to see something that not a whole lot of Westerners will get a chance to see, I think it will be great for viewers. I know it was, for me, it was incredibly inspiring and reinforced my understanding of my own faith as well.
It was the longest road.
No, I've had that experience when you're there. It makes it all come alive again. This 146-mile stretch of road connects these major cities that are all central to Christianity and Judaism. How did this journey, along with your travel companion, enrich your faith? Did it change your faith, and were you surprised by anything you discovered there?
Oh, goodness. I think you're always surprised. Your point about being in the Holy Land, you always see things and you unpeel the story and gain depth. That certainly happened on this experience as well. These were roads less traveled, places that I'd not had the chance to be. But, I will say this, Raymond, we also, and you'll see this in the movie, we interacted with lots of local citizenry, not only in Jerusalem, but in other places as well. And you saw that these were places inhabited by Christians and Jews and Arabs, Arab Muslims, Christian Arabs, and you got a chance to interact with them. And they were so thrilled to see us there. We all see Judea and Samaria often on TV, and it's people throwing rockets and grenades and smoke. We got a chance to see a different piece of its modern day history and to remind ourselves of why this place is so central to both Jews and Christians.
Yeah, it's quite a journey. Mr. Secretary, before I let you go, I need your thoughts, and you alluded to it earlier with the Abrahamic Accords. Tell us the current state of Arab-Israeli relations in the Middle East. I mean, this week marks the third anniversary of those Abraham Accords, the bilateral agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. The accords were supposed to lessen the Muslim, Jewish, Arab-Israeli tension and spur greater economic cooperation. In the last 3 years, what have you seen as a result of this treaty, and has it been allowed to reach its full potential?
Raymond, there's always more room to grow, but there's no doubt that the things we hoped would happen have happened in large measure. More economic connectivity between the two, security relationships between them are deeper, diplomatic relationships between them. There's airplanes traveling now from Tel Aviv Jaffa Airport to the United Arab Emirates and Sudan and Morocco, something that, we kind of take for granted in the United States. You can hop on a plane and fly from Vegas to LA to New York. That didn't happen for decades. And so the relationships among not only peoples of different nations, but people of different faiths have absolutely deepened. It was a long time coming. It will take a lot more effort. I hope that other nations will join the Abraham Accords, and I hope every country all around the world, including all of each of the Gulf Arab states, will come to understand Israel's rightful place in the world.
Before I end, and I mention the film one more time, were you stunned that the Saudis found common ground and are now working with the Iranian regime? Did that surprise you?
Raymond, when the United States is not a reliable partner, when a president calls the leader of another country a pariah, it shouldn't surprise anyone that they try to find a solution to provide security for their own people. They try to take down tensions with what are real threats. I think the leadership in the Gulf Arab states understands that the world's largest state sponsor of terror, the Iranian regime, is not a friend. But when the United States isn't prepared to be a good partner, to be a good ally, to help you where you need help, it doesn't surprise me at all that other countries are finding China or Iran or North Korea as places, well, they've just got to take down the tension a little bit. It saddens me, but I know how nations behave. They're always going to protect themselves, Raymond. And when we're not there to just be that partner, there's always risk they'll find others.
Secretary Pompeo, thank you for your insight. And the film Route 60, the Biblical Highway, featuring Mike Pompeo, is in theaters September 18th and 19th only. Go to route60.movie for more information and tickets. Thank you, Secretary Pompeo.
Raymond, thank you. Bless you. Have a good day.